Tom, before we get on to your trip to Prague and your safe return home, thank goodness for that, after West Ham won their first European trophy for 40-something years. Man City, they did it. Was it any great surprise to you in the end that they won the European Cup, they won the treble, and they are the best team in Europe?
Look, I think there's two ways to answer that question, and I think if we start with the positive of Manchester City, and I struggle to do that, but if you step away from the second part of my answer, the first part is Pep Guardiola is a genius. He is a genius coach. He understands football like maybe no one else has ever understood football. He has quite literally created a formation for this team. He has changed the way people play football at the very top level and changed the way how people listening to this play over the park. There will be someone listening to this program now who plays amateur football or kids football, and he or she will now receive the ball from the goalkeeper, rolled out, and people will pass the ball out from the back in certain ways. That's because Guardiola started doing that 15 years ago, and all of football changed to that whim. You look at the quality of the players, the quality of the football, the sheer amount of victories, the incredible run to win the Premier League, the victory over Real Madrid at the Etihad, all of that thrown together, taken on a surface level, incredible. They are the best team in Europe. They're one of the best teams you've ever seen live in your entire life, and they deserve to win the trophy that they won. The trouble is, and it annoys me greatly, is I was watching the coverage on BT Sport over here in the UK, and the commentator billed it like it was some underdog story, like it was some sort of Coach Carter 2, where Coach Carter takes some underprivileged kids and turns them into world basketball champions. It wasn't that. What this is the success of a sovereign wealth fund sports ownership model that has totally changed what football fundamentally is at the top level. This is wealth we have never seen before. It is disparity we've never seen before. And the blueprint is now there for how a country can come in, buy a club, buy a league. And that success is now being replicated, not just club to club, looking at Newcastle and Paris Saint-Germain, and other times nations are now investing in clubs. It's entire sports. The Saudis have come for golf and got it. They're coming for tennis. They'll get it. I'm sure they'll be European champions with Newcastle United at some point soon. They'll have the World Cup in 2030. And, that would be fine in some ways. In other ways, thinking about human rights and liberalism and the concept of Western culture, maybe it's something we could be slightly protective over. Plus, should we be allowing hyper-capitalism to be victorious? When you look at the Sevilla-Roma Europa League final and the West Ham Fiorentina Conference League final, it's still millionaires. It might even be billionaires, but it's certainly not the wealth of entire countries. So I'm pleased for them on one level. I'm pleased for the old blokes that have supported him since 1965 and went to see him on the Kipax and went to see him when they went down to League One, which was Division 3 a few years ago, all that sort of stuff. For them, I am pleased. For anyone who started supporting them in this new era, I don't feel much about it.
Yeah, that's what I get as well. Look, we're talking to a guy called Ian Cheeseman. I'm sure you've heard of that name before, right? He's called for the BBC. He's been a lifelong City fan. Good old Cheese, mate.
Cheesy.
Yeah, I mean, Cheesy, he's coming up next, and he followed them. He was there in the late '60s when they played a European Cup Winners' Cup semi-final. He's been through absolutely. I love all those guys. That miserable Man City face we've seen on the terraces for so long. But, look, these days, look, you're going to be a Tom Brady fan with New England Patriots, and you were Chelsea last week, you're Man City this week, you might be whoever it is next. All of that. We've just got to give all that up, Tom, because this is the way of the world these days, mate, and this is how fandom is these days. I was a Golden State fan last week. I'm a LeBron fan today,
Look, I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think there is a generation of fans that maybe are more into players and success than they are their local team. But I don't think that has died out, and I don't think it'll ever die out. And I think Ian Cheeseman's a great example of someone that's been through a whole era before getting to this era. Look, the issue with this for me, and I think I did acknowledge how good this Man City team are, and I've said repeatedly how much of a genius I think Pep Guardiola is, but there are questions to answer, and a fundamental question about distribution of wealth, about competition, and about where the great game of football is going and whether it can be stopped. It can still be stopped with proper regulation, proper consultation, and proper wealth distribution. Until that happens, we're going to get the Saudis against the Qataris, against whoever else at the very top of the Premier League and the top of European football. And the only way to compete is to get another country from the Middle East who is stealing the natural wealth of their country to invest into another. That's all that we're going to be allowed to do. But, there's an element to this here that I always get this thrown at me because I bring this up all the time because I think it's fundamentally wrong. And I think BT Sport in the UK, which I watched it on last night, are fundamentally wrong to not mention it.
Yeah, you're right.
It's one of those things where, look, if you're supporting the team, I support West Ham and I've supported them since I was like 10 years old. And my dad's been going since the mid-60s, right? So I am grandfathered in. I've got no choice in that team. If they get bought by Mohammed bin Salman and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, I'm not going to go get another team. I don't think. We'll see what happens, but I don't think that'll happen. But if we win the Champions League, West Ham fans would celebrate way better than the Man City fans who, that was not limbs, guys. Come on. But also, I would not mention it. I wouldn't just gloss over it. And it annoys me that so many football fans are happy to just gloss over human rights abuses, hyper-capitalism, all these fundamental issues that are taking away competition from sport to be like, yeah, but we won 5 leagues in 6 and won the Champions League. Love and marriage, horse and carriage. You can't have one without the other. So just tell us, and still you can be happy.
Finally, I was watching some it got a bit naughty in Prague when you were there for the Conference League final. There were some chairs being thrown around. There was some ultras that were trying to have a crack in that. What did you see? Was it a bit ugly at times?
Well, I'll tell you what was funny about the day, or weird on that score, was across the day, and I got up super early. I walked like 15 miles across Prague to kind of work off the nerves across the day. And I'd got on the train to the stadium, so I'd missed the kind of ultras, which was, as ever, a bunch of utter losers, normally teenagers and 70-year-old geezers and nothing in the middle. And instead of going to the main town square where there was, without exaggeration, 10,000 West Ham fans, they go to the streets outside where it's dads and lads and families having a bit of dinner before going to the game, and they decided to attack them. And I know people that did get attacked in the streets, outside restaurants, by ultras, right? So horrendous. But I didn't actually see that because I'd got on the train to the game. And that's what led to, I think, inside the game. Firstly, I was sitting quite near to the Fiorentina fans because the stadium was 70 to 80% West Ham fans, because obviously in a 20,000-seater venue, the neutral ground is not going to be taken up by all sponsors and locals. I got a ticket because I found a way to get a ticket, as everyone who got into that ground pretty much did. But you're sitting by the Fiorentina fans, supposedly in a neutral section. I'm obviously supporting West Ham during the game, and I had Fiorentina fans sitting 10 feet away from me with their shirts off, doing slit throat gestures to me throughout the entire game. And if that game had gone another way, I think things could have got very, very ugly. Thankfully, from my perspective and the amount of people from their perspective, West Ham won the game. But it just changed the atmosphere. We all got notifications on our phones of what had happened back in the town square as we were getting the train to the game. And it went from lovely sunny old day, and I'd been in a queue earlier in the day to get my photo done with the trophy with a bunch of lads from Fiorentina. We had a perfectly nice time. I'm not into getting into the fights at the football. It's a total waste of life. But suddenly you're there, and suddenly it's on, and suddenly you're mixing in the concourses with these fans, and a lot of them are out for trouble. And then you've got these everyone's drinking real lager, which you're not supposed to do. It's banned in UEFA games, but I'm drinking a 5% Czech lager, and you had to buy a cup that was actually weighted, heavy, thick plastic, which got thrown on the pitch by some moron West Ham fan, Biragi, the Fiorentina fullback. So things became quite nasty actually during the game. So it was poorly policed. It was a poor venue. The Fiorentina fans and their ultras let themselves down. Some West Ham fans in response let themselves down during the game. It did feel on edge, and it could have gone either way. Thankfully, because West Ham won, the Fiorentina fans left, and West Ham fans like me were in the stadium for 2 hours afterwards, and then we could get over that and get on to just experiencing, for the first time in my entire life, and maybe the last, the bizarre elation, confusion of your team winning a tournament. And the first thing I did was to call off my sister. I then called the wife. I couldn't get hold of my dad, but I'm FaceTiming people saying can you possibly believe this has happened? And that's being replicated by everyone around. And it just made me think this is what more football fans should get. It shouldn't be trebles and quadruples and 5 titles out of 6. When you've won something, you should go to the back of the pile, and next year it's Villa's turn or Brighton's turn or Everton's turn. And so I'm trying not to think too much about how nasty it could have got, and at times how nasty it was, and trying to think about it was probably, away from the obvious stuff, marriage and kids, the greatest day I've ever experienced. So I'm trying to hook into that.